Hello everyone, this is Giacomo with STL Tones and welcome back to this series dedicated to AmpHub. So in this video we're talking about clean tones, so let's dive right in. First of all, the questions I ask myself are: what guitar am I using? And what sound do I want to achieve and in what musical context? So these questions help me make the right choice, avoiding making decisions based solely on habit or various dogmas found online. Let's start, for example, with wanting to create a vintage-inspired sound, a smooth sound, a bit old school. I'm using, in this case, a Strat-style guitar, and it's a classic for these kind of tones. I've just loaded an instance of STL Tones AmpHub. As usual, you already know this, the first thing I'll do is opening the input level listener and checking the best level for my guitar. In this case, these are vintage specs pickups, so I'm gonna choose low output and play a bit to let AmpHub find the best input volume for this specific guitar and my setup. Let's play. The input level listener did its job, ended up going to cut minus 2.4 dB. We've seen this in the previous video. This is a really important step to let AmpHub see the correct level, to let every model inside it working correctly and perfectly. Wanting to go in a vintage direction, I will start with a combo amp. Perhaps let's pick up the Phoenix HRV 1996 based on a Fender DeVille 410, so a 4x10 speakers. At this stage I'm only listening to the amp's gain level and I'm gonna set it for the level I want, and I'm also adding a touch of reverb, so what I call a service reverb, so the sound isn't completely dry. Let's listen to it. Okay, I like it. So even before setting it now, I move to the cabinet section to load the corresponding cabinet for the model I chose. So AmpHub offers a wide choice of microphones and I always start with just one to listen how the entire system responds. As you know, the choice of the cabinet is really crucial and has a very deep impact on how the sound results. So I really suggest you to spend a bit of time choosing the right cabinet for your tone. In some cases, this may affect a lot more the tone than the amp's model. So I'm gonna put a slider on the left side, so let's work with one module at a time, and I'm gonna load the Phoenix with the 57, so a great classic, timeless. I position it approximately as I would in the real world and I listen to the sound low. So let's find this kind of spot. Everything is cool now, the low pass is here. Let's leave it in this way and let's listen to it. Please listen how the sound changed compared to the previous cab. Let's listen, for example, the right side speaker to let you better understand how the cabinet choice affects the tone. It's pretty a solid difference, so really spend the right time choosing the best cabinet. At this point, I evaluate the microphone position, and even before starting to tweak the amplifier settings, I try moving the microphone to find a position that satisfies me. Working with just one microphone is also a great way to learn the basics of miking. There is something really important to improve your sound tweaking in the future. So I'm not looking exactly at a bright tone, I'm looking for a vintage style tone, so I don't want a really bright sound, but I'm kind of looking for the best balance between bass frequencies, mid frequencies, and high frequencies. In this specific step, I mainly focus on the bass and mid-high frequencies that I think are the things that we really have to care about when dealing with clean tones, but in general with every guitar tone. Let's try to change microphone, for example, and let's go through 87. Are you listening how much difference it is from a 57 to an 87 on the same exact spot? So really, once again, spend the right time working with cabinet and speaker positions. I like the 87 sound, but now I'm missing some bass frequencies. So now, before moving to the amplifier setting, I'm gonna recall the exact microphone that we loaded before, the 57, and I'm trying blending these two to fill the gap I was listening. So with the 87, I was hearing a better balance of the sound, but I was missing something. So let's load again the 87 by its own. Let's moving like here and listen to it. Now let's add a bit of the 57 and let's hear it. So please notice how different it is when sliding the mix control on the cab section of AmpHub, and how the sound changes from this I'm kind of playing pretty much the same stuff while tweaking, so that you can go forward and back in the video and compare everything I did with a solid sample playing. So I, for example, like this position. I find the right balance of bass. So it's quite a generous sound on the bass frequencies, but I'm looking forward to hearing a vintage kind of sound, so something not so much thin in the low frequencies, and that's a sound that I pretty like. As you've heard, the two slots offered by AmpHub guarantee us to achieve the result we want in any situation, but remember, less is more, so we don't necessarily have to use both slots. The more elements we insert in the chain, the more difficult it will be to find the foundations of a good sound. Please remember that less is more. So moving on to the amplifier section now, I always recommend starting from the flat position of the knobs and thinking of the controls of the amp as tools to vary the character of the sound. So not exactly equalizing in the literal sense, because when equalizing in the literal sense, I'm just ending up going through the cabinet section, because that is really affecting the equalization of the sound really more than the controls on the amp. So it depends from amp to amp, but please remember that in some amps the EQ controls are before the gain stage. In other amps, these controls are not so much efficient. So the best way is thinking to the amplifier's control to tone shaping stuff, so how the sound reacts with those settings on. Instead, when talking about equalization, I'm gonna stay with cabinet section and maybe an equalizer in post, and we'll see that later. Let's, for example, try to tweak a bit the control since I've not touched anything on the interface. Let's take treble a little bit back, maybe middle too, and let's add a touch of bass. Adding a bit more of reverb. So I found the sound I like. I'm liking this sound. As you see, it was pretty easy, but I think we have to do the right steps in order to get the sound we want. And I think the really important thing is asking questions to ourselves. So at this point, if I feel that something needs tweaking, I move to the effects block in post and I add an equalizer, in this case before the reverb. Let's load a GQ10 equalizer. So the equalization controls of an amplifier, as I just said, generally interact with the character of the sound. So let's do a final tone shaping with an equalizer as a studio engineer would, rather than modifying the amplifier controls. So if I found the sound that I like, don't tweak again the amp, but if I want, for example, less basses, maybe the very low frequencies, I can load an equalizer and pull back 30 Hz, for example. As you're hearing, this kind of operation is not so destructive, and it's really precise, and it's gonna serve to do the right thing that we have in mind. Let's hear, for example, with only one bass knob, what's gonna happen to the sound if I'm gonna lower them. As you can hear, the result is different. So let's see that I want a big, punchy, fat tone, but I want just to cut maybe a bit of muddiness in the very low end. So in this case, I prefer or to use an high pass, maybe linking both of slots, and maybe high passing at around 70 Hz. And if I need even more control, I'm gonna tweak maybe a little curve like that in the equalizer. These are very sub-frequencies, but please remember that every frequency that we don't really need is gonna create some kind of problems with the final mix, depending of course in the context we are playing on. But take in mind that we can tone shape in this section too. For example, a balancing sound in the sub frequencies with a very gentle roll off around 62, and we already did the high pass in the cab section, and maybe bouncing a bit 120 and 2050. Let's hear how it sounds. As you can hear, we can reach really different sounds, but the important thing is asking ourselves what sound we are looking for. That's really the questions that we have to ask ourselves constantly in order to make the right choices to do the best sound that we could. So it's all for this section of the video. Let's remember, choose the right speaker, choose the right microphone, choose the right microphone position, then go back to the amplifier we like and the amplifier we want to use in our rig, and then let's try to make the equalization things in different ways. So don't rely only on the amplifier section, because these controls are not really intended in the final equalization step as we intend it today in our studio or in our home studio. So my suggestion is do little things in various spots. So not do big changes. As you've seen in the amplifier section, I didn't make something like this, so extreme to cut basses and then treble. Nothing like that, but small changes in various areas. Let's move on to another example now. I've just loaded a DI in my project with a backing track of a song of mine I released years and years ago at the moment. So contrary to what we did earlier, let's use a pre-existing DI and place it in a mix contest. So as you know, the kind of sounds we are doing is really program dependent. So for example, when I'm in my home studio in my bedroom and I want to practice the guitar, I may like maybe a fatter, a warmer tone that is more enjoyable to play with. But talking of a mix contest, we have to look for the best tone for that specific song. So we have to ask ourselves what the song needs and not what is our taste about tones. Let's start listening. For example, this tone that I just did with the exact settings, pretty much the exact settings that we tweaked on the amp, and let's listen what we did before, how it sounds in this scenario. As you can hear, the sound is not really fitting the mix, is a little bit dark, is not shining in the mix. I have raised the output, but the sound doesn't cut through the mix, doesn't find its spot. So we have to work to find the best tone for this song. And for example, let's work maybe with a modern sound instead of the previous one, the vintage style. Let's work on a more modern sound. So first of all, I'll select, as we've learned before, a different speaker. I will go for a 4x12 Bogart SL V30 based on a Bogner 4x12 cab with V30 speakers. For this example, I want to load another amp. So I'm coming back to the amplifier and maybe I can load the let's take a look. The Pyros Archon based on the PRS Archon 50 watt. And the Pyros Archon is famous for distorted sounds, and few will choose it for a clean sound. So remember, let's hear sounds with our ears, and let's hear how it sounds with the cabinet we just selected. So Pyros Archon with the 4x12 cabinet based on the Bogner one with V30's speakers. It's not bad, but maybe let's work on the microphone placement while the track plays. I remind you again that the speaker and microphone play a fundamental role in a guitar setup, so personally, it's one of the first things I adjust when creating a sound. It's not bad, but maybe the first thing I'm gonna do is adding a compressor just to help the dynamics to have some sort of consistency. And I think the best way is to put it on post and not in front. So I'm kind of looking for a specific compressor behavior that it's gonna contain the high E strings that was played really hard, and that was made on purpose just to put some more elements in the discussion. So if the execution is not perfect, we have maybe to find the better instruments, the better tools, to let it better dial with the amplifier in order to get the best sound that we could. So fast attack to grab the transient and medium fast release. So let's jump back to the amplifier section and let's make some more adjustment to better fit the track into the mix, working with both the amplifier controls and the equalizer. So depending on the sound we want to achieve, it can be useful, for example, to set a more aggressive low cut on the cabinet and increase the bass on the amplifier to achieve a different result in terms of frequencies that we wouldn't have been able to achieve with just a single one control. Let's take a listen. The power of working it this way is that if I now change the amplifier, I'm I think, in the sweet spot, because the other thing we did in the cabinet section, the effect section, are some way helping in the whole situation, even if we change the amplifier. Let's try. As you've seen, we changed some amplifiers, and the sound is not completely destroying itself while changing amplifier, and that's why we made few tweaks in varied spots of the single chain. There are many paths to explore, and that's the beauty of building guitar sounds, and AmpHub in this context offers us a truly important flexibility, providing us all the tools to work on our sounds at the high level, I will say very, very easily. So please remember that in any case, it's a matter of taste, so I'm really suggesting you to spend the right amount of time working on your sound, and don't rely too much on the thing people say, not just because you don't have to trust people, but because you and only you really know what's the sound that you are looking for. And asking yourself the questions that we talked about in this video, I think it could really help finding the best tools to succeed in your guitar sound creation. So that's all for this video. As always, I remind you to click like, ringing the bell, and do whatever else you want to let us know that this content was useful for you. And I really thank you for being with us, and I'll see you in the next video.